Hello, and welcome to Episode 8 of the Penny Family History Slideshow. Once again, my name is David Penny. In the last episode, we went all the way up to the birth of my dad, Douglas Penny, in 1931. So today we're going to pick it up with his birth and his baby photos, and then we're going to talk about where the family lived during that time. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the trips to Muskoka and how that eventually turned into the first cottage in Waubashene, and some photos of that Waubashene cottage. And I'll locate it for you if you want to go up and have a little visit of the cottage. But before we get started, as always, grab your favorite drink. In my case, today I got a nice treat for myself. It's called a Glenfarclas, a nice 25-year-old Glenfarclas. I tried this. I was invited to a birthday party the other day, and my friend Ian, and we had a Scotch tasting at the Caledonian, which is a terrific Scottish pub down on College Street. And the Scotch tasting featured a 21-year-old Glenfarclas. And so I went to the LCBO, and I found a 25-year-old, which is, I guess, even better. Now, my usual whiskey of choice is the Macallan. I also like the Highland Park. However, they're all kind of smooth, sherry cask kinds of whiskey. The woman at the pub liked Glenfarclas because she said it was still a family-owned, run operation as opposed to that big conglomerate, which was the Macallan. So, anyways, enjoy your drink. Let's have a toast to the Penny family and to, as always, the successful execution of the Penny Family History Slideshow. Cheers. So this is just where we left off last time. Douglas Penny, my dad, born March 1931. And here he is very soon after being born. There's Alan looking very fondly on young Douglas. And there's Douglas on the left there, I think, being held by Phyllis. There's Phyllis and Alan, and Alan is holding Douglas. And that, I believe, is Anne, who's Douglas's grandmother. And on the right there is Uncle Mal, aged 11 at this point. So as you can see, Mal is 11 years older than Douglas, so he's kind of Douglas's big brother. He's also about that same amount younger than Alan, so he's also in some sense Alan's little brother. There's Mal. He's in the front row, the second from the right. That's him over here. And they're all holding harmonicas, I believe, in 1931 at school. There's Phyllis holding baby Douglas. Here's a bit of a group photo. That's Alan over here on the far side holding Douglas. And that's Uncle Alec over here in the middle. And the rest are apparently family friends. 1931. And there is Phyllis and Alan and Douglas in a basket at the back of their house. And the caption on this photo reads, Phyllis's friend, Mary Leader of Newmarket, and her then boyfriend, later husband, Errol Willis, in 1931. You'll recall Frida Leader worked at the insurance company and was a childhood friend of Phyllis as well. Both really Mary and Frida, but really Frida was the closer friend, I'd say. And Mary became Mary Willis and married Errol Willis, and they actually shared the Leonard Lake cottage. Now this, a little bit of doubt about this one. My dad labeled this as being Uncle Jim. It looks a bit like Uncle Jim. But I think it's Errol Willis. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe my cousins can help me out. This is around 1975 at Leonard Lake. Errol and Mary Willis had the cottage on Leonard Lake right next to my grandparents' cottage. The way it worked is that Alan originally owned the Waubashene cottage, and they sold that and then bought the Leonard Lake property, which were 2 lots. He took 1.5 lots for himself and then for a future second cottage. And Errol took half of one of the lots and built a relatively smaller cottage there and occupied it with his wife, Mary Willis. I remember Errol, he was a fine old man. They had a dog named Omar, which was a mutt with a bit of a German Shepherd in it, but the kindest, nicest dog you could imagine. It would get very worried when any of the kids went swimming. We'd jump into the lake and Omar would jump in right after us. He'd swim up to within about 5 feet and then make a big circle and swim back. He did that over and over and over again. Sometimes we'd play a trick on Omar and we'd start running and then stop short and Omar would dive in. But that dog got a lot of love from all of us kids, as did Mr. Willis. Now, Douglas was born while Alan and Phyllis lived in a rented house at 57 Woburn Avenue. So here on the map, here is where 57 Woburn Avenue is located. This is Young Street. Lawrence is down here. Interestingly enough, our current house where we live right now is up here. And the first house that my wife Kathleen and I occupied with our kids, Douglas and Brian, was over here on Woburn Avenue. So we all stayed fairly close. My dad was born there, and one of my sons was born here, and we lived there, and we live here now. This is the house here, 57 Woburn, and it's basically still standing as far as I can tell. Here is the census for 1931, so it gives us a sense of what the family was doing, and down here is the entry for 57 Woburn Avenue. I'll zoom in on that. So here are the occupants of the house. There's Alan Penny, who's the head of the house, Phyllis, who's the wife, Douglas Allen, who's the son, and then Frida Leader is a lodger in the house. So Phyllis's very best friend is lodging in the house. That must have been nice with a newborn baby around. And there's another lady named Enid Burrows who was lodging as well. And you can see their age is listed here. Alan is 25, Phyllis is 26, Douglas is 3 months at the time, Frida's 30, and Enid is 26. They give the monthly rental for the place, and it's $45 in 1921. And if you run through the government inflation calculator, you say cost of living is 2% this year, 3% this year, 1% that year. You compound that up. That comes out to $715 a month today. Yet, if I look now in the listings, the cost to rent a 5-bedroom house like that one is around $3,500. So that's a big difference. Maybe being led astray by this cost of living, certainly as far as housing and rental is concerned. Here we see where the person was born. Scotland, Ontario. Frida Leader was born in Switzerland, interestingly enough. And again, the father and the mother, Scotland for Alan, and Ontario, that's for Walter Watts, for Phyllis, and England for her mother. And then for Douglas, his father was born in Scotland, and his mom was born in Ontario. And we can also see here that Frida was she spoke French. Can you speak French? Yes. And what other languages? Well, German as well. So Frida spoke English, German, and French at least. They give the religion. Everyone is a Presbyterian over here. The profession, Alan listed his profession as a bridgeman on the steam railway. And Phyllis was a homemaker. And Frida was a clerk at the life insurance office, so she still has that job. and Enid was a bookkeeper at some regalia manufacturers. Alan made $1,472 in the last 12-month period. And it says here, was he how many weeks he was unemployed during the year, and he says he was unemployed for 6 weeks, and it was a temporary layoff. He also clicked off accident, but I don't know if that meant he was laid off because he had an accident or he was laid off and he also had an accident. $1,472 in 1921 is $23,000 today. You could raise a family and have a decent house and all that for $1,472 in 1921. What was the rest of the family doing? Well, there's an entry over here for 367 Keewatin Avenue as well. You see the pennies down here, and I'll zoom in on that. You can see Alex Penny is living with John and Anne at the time, and their adopted son Malcolm. So that's 367 Woburn. Alex is the son, and John is the head. There's a wife and a grandson, and that's relative to the head of the family. And their ages are given over here. And this is Alex, and you can see Jock here. He's closed the gap with his wife in terms of age for the first time in a official document. So that's an incorrect age. They were much further apart in years than that. And here's Mal, who's 11 years old. They list the value of the home. Remember, this was the rent if it was a rental property, but it's the value of the home. So they list the value of the home as $4,200. So that was about 3 times a bridgeman's salary. The same house now approximately is about 30 times arbitrary $60,000 salary. So housing went up by a factor of 10 easily, even after inflation is taken into account. Here's the birthplaces given, and any languages, nothing to see there. Scotland down. You can see Alec came 1 year earlier than the rest of the family, as we covered. And here's where they give their occupations. Alex was a bridge builder on the steam railway, just like Alan, making almost the same $1,480 as Alan made as well. That's actually, I think, $5 more, but he was quite a bit older as well. Jock gives his profession as stonemason on his own account, so he works for himself as an independent stonemason. Notice he doesn't give his how much he made during the past year. I guess it was optional on the census to provide that. And if you're self-employed, maybe you play a little fast and loose with with getting paid in cash and things like that, perhaps. And he didn't want to divulge that. Phyllis is listed as a homemaker, and Mal is listed as a student. So here's young Douglas down here. He's the younger of these two, and over here as well. This is Aunt Georgie, who come to visit. And the other child is Edwin Whaley, which is Sewell and Vera's son. And this is outside of 57 Woburn Avenue, over here, just out of the photo. That's 57 here, but you can see that the house that's next door, that's part of the same house, is it still has that same 4-post setup over here. So you can see it's the same brick house. And there's some more photos of the same group: Edwin, Douglas, and Aunt Georgie. And there's Douglas, age 15 months. That's what's on the photo. So that would be June of 1932. I believe he's playing with a toy train, which would make a lot of sense given the family's profession. Here the caption is Doug at 1.5 years. So that would make it September 1932. There's his teddy bear. And that playpen looks pretty rough and ready. It's been hammered together by Alan, I guess, with boards and whatnot. Keeps him out of trouble. There's a family photo of there's Jock and Anne and Alan with Douglas at his feet. That's Phyllis next to Alan, and then that's Alec next to him. I imagine the shadow is likely Uncle Mal. Like I say, I think Uncle Mal had a real interest in photography. I think a lot of these photos originated with Uncle Mal. There's a Jock and Alan with Douglas showing off the 3 generations of the Penny Men, 1932. And there's Douglas on the front steps of 1042 Mount Pleasant Avenue in 1933. So what's 1042? Well, the family moves, I imagine, closer to, well, definitely moved closer to Jock and Ann. I imagine that was the reason. This was the old rented house at 57 Woburn, and they rent a new house at 1042 Mount Pleasant, which is right here. And remember, 367 Keewatin is where Jock and Ann live, so much closer. Here, modern day, this over here is 1042 Mount Pleasant, and so it's still the same old house, actually. I've got a side-by-side comparison next. There again, you can see this part of the balcony was taken away to provide parking for pad parking for a car. But you can see the same general form of pillars over here. And you can see the same old brick as well. There's a Douglas in the backyard of 1042 Mount Pleasant on his like a tricycle. And there's Doug at age 2.5, ready to travel, obviously. Perhaps they're about to go up north. There's Edwin Whaley and Douglas in the wading pool at Sherwood Park in 1933. So as you'll recall in the last episode, the family was doing a lot of camping at Morrison Lake, but apparently they got a little tired of Morrison Lake, and so they tried camping at Waubashene, which is at the southeastern tip of Georgian Bay. I've marked it here on the map. That's at the Narrows into Matsudash Bay. This whole thing here is Georgian Bay. This is part of Lake Huron. This is Sturgeon Bay in here, and Sturgeon Bay even has a little bay. So the bay has a bay, which even has a bay called Matsudash Bay. And they identified that they were camping in a field at the west end of town belonging to a local farmer, Mr. Shine. And later on, they go on to buy the property on which they camped and build a cottage there. But we'll get to that in a moment. This is in the summer of 1933. Here they are with their old car, their old tent, setting up the fishing rods. Alec and Alan, I believe. There's Grandma Penny and Gavin Ross Penny doing the washing up at Waubashene. This is an odd picture. I believe that is Jock and Ann there. Maybe that's little Douglas and Alec. It's hard to make out, but it looks like Alec from his cap, and I think he has his pipe. And that's at Waubashene for sure. And there's a black fella playing an accordion. Guess fellow camper. There's Alex and his catch, a huge garpike and a string of largemouth black bass. Waubashene, 1933. Again, a lot of these captions I'm reading you come from my dad's captions on these photos. There's Alex enjoying a beer, and my dad took pains to point out that it was always Labatt's India Pale Ale. That's a little bit significant, as I'll show you in a moment. This was an ad right around that time, 3 years later on the left for the Labatt's Export Ale. And this was an ad that ran a few years later in 1941. Have you noticed how pleasantly the flavor lingers on your palate? Well, that's the final test of a good ale. Your common sense tells you that only the finest ingredients, only the most skillful brewing could give Labatt's that extra quality, the quality whereby your palate is still pleased after the ale is gone. Probably this final test of goodness could not be passed, even by Labatt's, if it were not for Labatt's 3 exclusive advantages. They are 1, an original English formula for India Pale Ale. 2, a family tradition of brewing craft, which insists Labatt's be brewed the slow, patient, natural way. 3, the deep well water of London, Canada. Ask for Labatt's next time. Ask for it by name, and then you'll be sure you really get Labatt's. If it doesn't taste like Labatt's, it isn't Labatt's. And buy war saving certificates, because by the time that ad came out, it was already wartime. Labatt's was famous for this iconic 1950s ad. In the previous ad, they were extolling the virtues of the beer. Here they're trying to say that here's a real man's ale, full strength IPA, India Pale Ale. Labatt's India Pale Ale has an honest, masculine directness, no half-heartedness about it. It's full strength, full-bodied, full-flavored. Just another way of saying it's a man's ale. Labatt's India Pale Ale. So it was apparently one of the few IPAs available at that time, and not only an IPA but a full-strength IPA. So it was quite a mouthful. So nice to know that Alex had a taste for strong, manly beers as opposed to those other kinds. There's Douglas on the back porch at 1042 Mount Pleasant, and obviously the fall or winter of 1933. There's the senior Pennies with Uncle Alex camping near North Bay. This is the next year in the summer of 1934. I guess they said, well, Waubashene was nice, but let's take a look further north as well. So they went way up to North Bay. And there they are again, same place. That's Anne there. And again, the senior Pennies with Uncle Alex. I'm not sure who that gentleman on the right is. He doesn't look like ours. But that's Anne sitting near the tent. And I think that's Alex with the tire, maybe fixing a flat. And there's Alan and Phyllis with their friends, the Sharplesses, Brian and Marion Sharpless, and their 2-year-old daughter, Joan. And at this point, they're camping north of Huntsville with the Sharplesses' brand new car. And there they are washing up. So that brings us to the Waubashene cottage. So in 1934, the Penny family like Waubashene, and Alan decides to buy the lot where they had previously camped and build a cottage. The town is on the CNR, and there is daily service to and from Toronto, for which he and the family can use his CNR pass. Throughout the spring, he collects still usable wood from CNR boxcars being scrapped in the backyard of Mount Pleasant, and borrows the CNR Bridge and Building Department truck to haul it north. So they were using scrap wood, collecting it in the backyard, and then hauling it up north. So here's a little map of Waubashene over here. This is Waubashene on the right. The main purpose of this railway that came by here, basically, and it went up to Port McNicoll. McNicoll is named after one of the presidents of the Canadian National Railway, who was responsible for essentially building Port McNicoll. And the trains would come right up, and they built a huge pier, and they'd offload from the trains onto the ships. And the ships, of course, on Georgian Bay here, you'd connect to Lake Huron and over to the States, Detroit, Michigan, things like that. So it was, for a time, it was the way to move things about. So here's a satellite view of the thing. The cottage is described as being in a field on the west end of town, a half mile, about 800 meters, away from the public pier. So that here is the public pier. It's on the west end of town, so it's over here. And if you count out 800 meters, puts the cottage right around here. And I've got 2 other coordinates as well later on, which confirms this location. This road here is called Albin Road, that goes to this little point here. You can drop your boat off and float it, or you can go into town if you go in the other direction. And that the front drive led on to Albin Road. This thing here is the old railway line, which has now become a trail, a walking trail, the Trans-Canada Trail. So you can drive up here and have a really nice walk along this trail and come within meters of where the old cottage was. We're zooming in a little bit more. Like I say, I reckon it's around here was the cottage. And this is the Trans-Canada Trail here, which was where the old railway tracks were. The cottage was here, so they had to cross the tracks, and then they went swimming over here. And if they wanted to dive, because the water was fairly shallow, you had to go all the way up here, and then you could dive off the edge. And there it is, the public pier, half a mile away, the place to go if you wanted to dive. So here they are starting to build the cottage in 1934. They set up a tent, and they got all that scrap wood up, and now they're starting to put it together. You know, the family were Alex and Alan, they were carpenters, and Jock was a handy fellow as well, and Mal was chipping in. There's Malcolm on the left and Alan on the right, painting the new cottage, made from all that boxcar wood in 1934. Well, while they're doing that, Phyllis and Douglas stay a little further north at the Cache Lake Resort, which you'll recall from the last episode, Phyllis was there. And so they stay there while the cottage is being built in 1934, in the summer. There's Douglas standing by the canoe, and we don't know who the other kids are. Here's some more of Douglas with his Mickey Mouse shirt. And in the boat. And there's Douglas, aged 3.5 years, on August 1st, 1934. And the cottage is done by the summer of 1935. So a good effort. And they named their cottage. So the cottage has a name called Rockwood. And you can't tell that from this sign, but there's another picture later on that has a big sign at the driveway on the way in that says Rockwood. The cottage, they had these nice storm shutters. There's Alex, Malcolm, and Granddad Penny, Jock, with a good catch in 1935 at Waubashene. This is a little postcard that was in our possession. It's the Russell General Store in Waubashene. My dad describes it as our shopping plaza. They sold everything from ice, milk, and butter, delivered daily in season, to underwear, hardware, shotgun shells, candy, groceries, etc., etc. And I love the old gas pumps. And here's the station in Waubashene on the CNR line from Orillia to Midland. Now, I got an old railway map and tried to match it up to my dad's description. So on the right is my dad's description. Passenger train started at Union Station, which is down here at the bottom. They stopped at Parkland and St. Clair in Toronto. I'm not sure. There is no street named Parkland, so I'm not sure what that means. But it was either went up this way or it went over that way. So I'm not 100% sure. But it's one of these two red lines up to Barrie. The train divided at Barrie-Allendale. So you had to be in the right car. You know, if you're in the front three cars, it went one way. If you're in the back three cars, it went the other way. So half of the train, one section went off to Collingwood, which is in that direction over here, towards Collingwood. And the other section went up to Orillia, which is over this way, like that. And again at Orillia, one section went on to North Bay, which was going up this way, and the other to Midland over here, and it stopped at Waubashene. That right there, that stop is Waubashene, and Port McNichol is over here. So very handy daily train service and free because of the rail pass. My dad says we walked about a mile along the tracks to the cottage. He describes how the CNR ran along the Bayshore, that's over here, which is now this Trans-Canada Path, or trail. Behind them, to the south in this direction, were two rows of cottage lots serviced by a gravel road which I figure is Albin Road, that led back to town in one direction and to a public right-of-way on the shore where boats could be pulled up. So that's right here, I figure. Ours was the second row, so the second row back, about 100 yards from the bay and about 300 yards along the road to the right-of-way on the shore. So I converted that to meters and figured those two things out. So it puts the cottage right around here, which was very consistent with that other measurement I had. Here, this is a view right place where you can drop your boat off the right of way is just here. And it's where Albin Road and the old railway tracks, which is now this trail, come together. So yeah, park your car up here and have a walk. The cottage is not too far beyond. This is one candidate for where it could be. This driveway looks very familiar from another picture that I have later on. Not a perfect match, but pretty familiar. And you can see that where that photo is taken from on Google Maps, standing right here. And this is where the 300 yards and the 100 yards is. So that's a really good candidate. 254 Albin Road. There's Granddad Penny with another good catch in either 1935 or 1936. And here's early visitors to the cottage. So that's Phyllis in the center here, along with her half-sisters Madge over here and Elizabeth over there. And this is my dad's caption, Elizabeth, always called Bessie in those days. My dad respected that Elizabeth wanted to be called Elizabeth, but had a hard time referring to her to anything else but Bessie or Aunt Bessie. They described their favorite swimming spot, a narrow strip between the tracks. So the railway tracks are just back there, and the water with a bit of sandy beach in between. Not exactly sure who everybody is, but that sure looks like Alan. Maybe Mal here. The Waubashene's principal resort, the Waubashene Inn. Postcard my dad had. Getting back to the city, there's Jock and Ann at their house at 367 Keewat. Remember, they lived there with Malcolm and with Uncle Alec. There's Uncle Alec in the back garden. The garden has really grown up, hasn't it? There's Uncle Alex again. Here's Uncle Mal in 1935 in the backyard at 367 Keewatin. He's reading a true crime magazine. And here he is inside 367 Keewatin. And there's Uncle Mal again, a different picture in 1935. There's Jock and Ann. There they are again. Anne always looks so dour. And there they are again. That's a classic picture of Anne, looking dour, holding the newspaper. And there she is again, in her garden. And Jock in the garden at 367 Keewatin. There's Alex, who lived there as well. And this is Alex and Bessie, Aunt Bessie, or Elizabeth, as she prefers in later life to be called. This was in 1935. They met earlier than this, but they'll be married about less than a year later in February of 1936. So they may well be engaged at this point. And there they are on a railway car. Alex brought her to see the trains. And on June 2nd, 1935, Philip Wayne Penny is born to Phyllis and Alan Penny. And here's Wayne at 2.5 months and Doug at 4.5 years in 1935. There's Uncle Wayne there, and that's my dad there. And I'll figure that's where we'll end it. It's funny that I don't have any early baby pictures of Wayne. I'm not sure why that is. I went through all our photos. It's not that my dad excluded them or anything, We just don't seem to have a lot of baby pictures of Wayne, and maybe that's when my dad went through the photos. He picked up all the baby pictures of Wayne and gave them to him. I'm not 100% sure, but there are some of Wayne, especially when he's with Douglas. So next time we'll pick it up there and keep going. So there we have it. My Uncle Wayne has just been born in 1935, and we'll pick it up from there next time. Remember, we're about to go into the World War II years. It starts in 1939, so we're getting close to that, and we'll see what happens during World War II anyways. In the meantime, let's have a toast. Toast to the Penny family. Cheers. See you next time.